I thought I'd be invisible at my sister's wedding, just a background character to everyone's perfect day, until my mom called me useless in front of the entire family. But then something unexpected happened. I was introduced as the head sponsor of the entire event. Everything changed in that moment, and I knew my life was about to take a different turn. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. I never imagined this would be the day I'd regret. Of all the weddings I'd ever been to, this one, my sister Jane's, was supposed to be a beautiful celebration. I'm in my early 50s, but Jane and I have always been different. While she's been out living a glamorous life, having fancy dinners and endless vacations, I've stayed at home, working as a part-time bookkeeper. Nothing extravagant, nothing anyone notices. Today, I was just the supportive older sister standing at the back of the room, trying not to take up too much space. The church was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years. Their smiles, their laughter, their polished outfits made me feel small. I sat in the third row, hidden behind the tall flowers they had arranged so perfectly, just the way Jane wanted. The air smelled like lilies and sweet perfume, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like being in the wrong movie and I wasn't even an extra. As Jane walked down the aisle, every eye in the room was on her. The applause was overwhelming, like she had just stepped into the role she was born to play. Then I heard it. "Look at her, she doesn't even know how to put herself together. Useless." My mom's words sliced through the air as if she was speaking directly to me. I couldn't believe it. She'd said it loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Her gaze never met mine. She was too busy fawning over Jane, wiping away imaginary tears. I wanted to shrink, to disappear. I thought I'd been doing everything right, helping with the planning, picking up decorations, arranging the catering. But apparently it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. "Don't listen to her, it's just her way," whispered Aunt Lucy, who was seated beside me. Her hand squeezed mine, but it didn't help. No, it made it worse. Mom's voice still echoed in my head, and I wasn't sure I could shake it off. I leaned back in my seat and tried to breathe, but the room felt like it was closing in. I wanted to escape. I wanted to run out of the church, but I stayed. I stayed because Jane needed me there, or so I thought. After the vows and the I do's, the reception began. The guests were mingling, the music was playing, and everything seemed perfect. But not for me, not after Mom's cruel words. I wandered over to the refreshment table, hoping no one would notice me. That's when it happened. "Excuse me, Miss Taylor?" A voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to see one of the event coordinators standing there with a clipboard, her expression a little too friendly. "Yes?" I muttered, wiping my hands on my dress. She smiled and handed me a small microphone. "We need you to head over to the stage now. You're the head sponsor for the event." I blinked at her, utterly confused. "Pardon? Your name is Taylor, right? You're the head sponsor. You were introduced as such during the rehearsal." I felt the blood drain from my face. My throat tightened. "Wait, I'm not," I stammered. "Oh, there's been a mix-up," she said quickly. "But it's all taken care of. They'll announce it in a minute." I was speechless. For a moment, I thought I was being pranked, but then I realized this was real. Mom had never said a word about it. I had no idea I was even listed as a sponsor, let alone the head sponsor. I followed the coordinator toward the stage, my heart racing. Before I knew it, I was handed the microphone and the spotlight hit me. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer said, "please welcome our head sponsor for today's event, Miss Taylor, who has generously supported Jane and Peter's wedding." I heard a few murmurs in the crowd, but my eyes were locked on Mom. Her expression froze when she saw me up there. I couldn't believe it. The woman who just called me useless was now staring at me as if I had just changed everything she thought she knew. I smiled awkwardly into the mic, not sure what to say. I wasn't prepared for this. But then, as I glanced back at the crowd, I noticed something. A few people, including Aunt Lucy, were looking at me with a mix of respect and curiosity. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my hands. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. It's truly an honor." I paused, trying to think of something more to say. But the spotlight, the sudden weight of the situation, it all started to sink in. I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I wasn't the person everyone overlooked. I was here and I was being recognized. It felt good, really good, too good to ignore. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. The applause echoed around me, but it wasn't the kind of applause you get when everyone is being polite. It was real. The kind that carried a weight, like the room was suddenly seeing me for the first time. I felt my cheeks flush, and my heart skipped a beat. For a moment, I was still, frozen at the center of that spotlight. I hadn't expected this. I had no idea what the sponsorship even entailed. What had I agreed to? But before I could ask anyone, the event coordinator approached me, smiling as if this was completely normal. "You're doing great, Miss Taylor. Just follow me to the VIP section and we'll make the formal introduction." I glanced over at the crowd again, searching for my family. My mother stood in the back corner, a mixture of disbelief and discomfort written all over her face. I could feel her disappointment in the air, sharp and palpable. But I didn't want to think about her right now, not when I had this newfound attention, when everything about my life seemed to be shifting, like a new chapter had just started. The coordinator ushered me toward the VIP section, and I followed with a nervous smile. There, sitting in a lavish velvet seat, were some of the wealthiest guests of the evening, people I'd only ever heard of in passing, the kind of people Jane surrounded herself with. I sat down trying to hold my composure. "You must be Miss Taylor," a man said, turning his head with a polite smile. His suit was tailored perfectly, and his watch sparkled under the lights. Yes, I stammered, suddenly feeling out of place. He extended his hand, and I shook it with a bit more hesitation than I would have liked. "Matthew Delaney. I've heard a lot about your generous contributions to the wedding." Matthew Delaney, of course, Jane had mentioned him. He was one of her high-profile business contacts, and here I was, sitting with him as if I belonged. "Thank you," I said, though I didn't have the slightest clue what contributions they were talking about. But I wasn't going to let on that I was out of my depth. I forced myself to stay calm. "Yes, Jane told us you'd be making a great impact on the future of her events," he continued. "How did you first meet Peter?" Peter was Jane's new husband, the guy she'd met during one of her countless luxury vacations. From the start, I never thought he was a good match for her. Too polished, too perfect. But Jane was happy, and that's all that mattered. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I quickly realized that I needed to play along, keep the conversation flowing, because suddenly, I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I was a part of something bigger. My mind raced to put together the details. "Well, Jane and Peter met through business, actually. I've known him for a while," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure how much truth there was in that. Matthew smiled, his eyes gleaming as he studied me, probably trying to gauge whether I was a useful connection. "That's interesting. I think there's more to you than what we've heard." I forced another smile, but inside I was panicking. What had I gotten myself into? But then I caught sight of my sister, Jane, talking to the other guests across the room. Her eyes flicked in my direction for a split second. She didn't smile, but I saw something in her gaze, a kind of tension that made me nervous. Did she know? Did she understand what was happening? As the evening wore on, I found myself fielding questions from more and more guests, all intrigued by my sudden status as the head sponsor. Everyone seemed to assume that I had some kind of wealth or influence I wasn't even aware of. They were polite, but there was a clear sense of interest, a questioning look in their eyes that made me uncomfortable. And then, just as I was starting to settle into this new role, something snapped. I turned around and found myself face to face with my mother, who had suddenly appeared at the edge of the VIP section. Her arms were crossed tightly and her lips were pursed. Her eyes met mine, full of judgment. "You didn't tell me you were the sponsor," she said sharply, her voice low but cutting. "Mom, I didn't know either," I said, trying to explain, but she wasn't listening. "You think this makes you special?" Her words were venomous, spat out with a coldness I hadn't heard from her in years. "You think this is what you've been waiting for? To play pretend?" I froze. The room felt smaller. The tension was suffocating. "I'm not pretending, Mom. I don't know what's going on, I admitted, my voice shaking. But I'm trying to make the best of it. Mom scoffed, clearly disgusted. You've always been so pathetic, always hiding behind your quiet little life. This is nothing. Nothing will change. My heart broke all over again. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, I realized something else. She doesn't control me anymore. I stood taller, no longer willing to shrink back from her or anyone. Before I could say anything else, Jane approached, wearing a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone icy and sharp. "Nothing," Mom said quickly, shooting me a glare before walking away. I couldn't help but watch as she retreated, the final sting of her words still ringing in my ears. But there was something else I couldn't shake, something that felt powerful. I wasn't the same person I had been an hour ago. I had just been humiliated in front of my family, but here I was sitting in the VIP section, being treated like I belonged. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I might actually have control over my own life. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I spent more time talking with Matthew and other sponsors than I did with my own family, but the shift had already happened. Jane, for all her smiles and glitz, couldn't hide the cracks in her carefully curated life. Something was different. I didn't know how, but it felt like the beginning of something bigger, something that would change everything. I couldn't quite shake the buzz from the night, the wedding, the attention, the spotlight. It was all so surreal. I kept replaying those moments in my mind, the way people looked at me, the way they treated me like I mattered. It wasn't just a fleeting moment. It was the start of something I hadn't even realized I needed until now. The day after the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the morning sunlight filtering through the window. My phone lay beside me, buzzing with messages I didn't quite have the courage to open yet. There were texts from Jane, from the event coordinator, from some of the other guests. Each message felt like it carried a weight of expectation. What was I supposed to do now? I felt a sudden tightness in my chest. I wasn't used to being in the spotlight. I was the woman in the back of the room, the one who blended in and stayed quiet. But suddenly, I wasn't just that anymore. My phone buzzed again, and this time I picked it up without hesitation. It was a message from Jane. "Hey, we need to talk. Can you come over? I want to clear some things up." Clear things up? I sighed, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Jane had always been the golden child, beautiful, outgoing, the center of every conversation. And me? I was always the quiet one, the bookkeeper, the useful but unnoticed sister. Now she wanted to talk? I stared at the message for a long moment before I typed a response. "Sure, I'll be there in an hour." When I arrived at Jane's place, she was waiting outside, pacing back and forth on her porch. Her usual flawless makeup was gone, replaced by a furrowed brow and tense posture. She wasn't dressed up like usual, no glamorous dresses, no flashy jewelry. It was almost like she wasn't the same person from the night before. "Thanks for coming," Jane said as I stepped up to her. Her voice was tight, guarded. "Let's sit." We moved to the patio furniture in the back, where she gestured for me to sit. I hesitated, but eventually did. "I don't know how to start this conversation," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "I guess I'm just shocked by what happened last night." I nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "I never expected you to be the sponsor. Honestly, when I heard the announcement, I thought it was a joke." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "I didn't know, Jane. I didn't sign up for any of it. I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do, helping with the wedding." She crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes narrowing. "You think this is all some kind of coincidence? The fact that you, of all people, ended up at the center of attention when I've spent my entire life building an image?" I blinked, feeling my stomach turn. "What are you saying? That I ruined your day? Because that's not what I wanted." "No, it's not that," Jane said, shaking her head. "I'm just confused. I've worked so hard to keep everything perfect. And you? You show up with no warning, and suddenly everyone's looking at you like you're some kind of star. People started asking questions about you, about why you didn't tell them you were involved, why you're suddenly so important." I held my breath, processing her words. Was this jealousy, or was it something deeper, something more about control, about Jane's own insecurities. "I'm sorry if I've caused any confusion," I said carefully, my voice softer than I wanted it to be. "But this wasn't intentional. I don't even know what's going on, Jane. I'm just trying to figure it out myself." She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ground for a moment. Then her eyes flicked back up to mine, and there was a vulnerability there, something I wasn't used to seeing in her. "I know, She paused, biting her lip. "I don't know what to do with this sudden shift. It's like everything is changing, and I don't like it." Change. The word hung in the air between us. "You've changed, Jane," I said before I could stop myself. "I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, you became someone who only cared about appearances, about being the perfect image, and I stayed behind, keeping quiet because I thought I had to." She looked away, her fingers fiddling with the edge of her sleeve. "It's not like that. I don't know how to be any different. I've built this life, this reputation, and now, with you suddenly being visible." She hesitated. "It makes me feel like I don't know who I am anymore." I let her words sink in. They weren't just about me. They were about her own struggles, her own fears. "Maybe that's the problem," I said softly. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding behind your image. You're allowed to not be perfect. You don't have to keep everyone at arm's length to be loved." She swallowed hard, her face softening. For a moment, there was silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something had shifted, like there was space for both of us to breathe and be real. "You think I can change?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "I do. But it starts with you being honest with yourself. Not just with me, but with everyone. Let go of trying to be perfect." She looked at me, a flicker of something, maybe relief, passing over her face. "Maybe you're right." We sat there for a while, letting the words hang in the air. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Nothing was fixed in that moment. But for the first time in years, we were talking. Really talking. I stood up to leave, but before I could step away, Jane reached out and touched my arm. "I'm sorry, Taylor, for everything." I smiled gently. "It's okay. I think we're both figuring it out." As I walked back to my car, the weight of everything started to feel different. Jane's apology had been a turning point, but it wasn't just about her. I was changing too. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat in the back of the church, unnoticed and insignificant. The spotlight wasn't just a fluke, it was a chance, a way forward. And I was finally ready to take it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Everything had changed, but it wasn't just about the attention I had received at the wedding. No, it was bigger than that. Something inside me had shifted, and it felt like I was no longer the person I had been for all those years. The quiet, invisible sister, the one who stayed in the background, letting everyone else take the spotlight, was gone. In her place, a new version of me had emerged, one who was ready to take control of her own life. It wasn't easy. The family, especially my mother, didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for me. After Jane and I had our heart-to-heart, I thought things might smooth over, but that wasn't the case. Mom was still the same, critical and distant. Every time I ran into her, she treated me with that familiar coldness, as if I were still the useless daughter she had always labeled me. It stung, but now it felt different, because I finally understood that her words didn't define me. But there was something else gnawing at me. I had been offered something more after the wedding. It had come in the form of an email from Matthew Delaney, the man I had met during the event. He had told me that he wanted to discuss opportunities regarding my future involvement in the event space. At first, I had brushed it off. I was still trying to wrap my head around everything that had happened, still processing the whirlwind of attention, when suddenly I was being offered a business opportunity. I found myself standing in front of a large glass building one afternoon, the wind brushing against my face. Matthew's office was on the top floor of this skyscraper, a sleek and modern space that screamed money. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I was here, and I couldn't turn back now. Walking into his office was like stepping into a completely different world. The polished wood floors, the abstract art on the walls, and the view of the city below all screamed success. Matthew was sitting behind a large desk, looking every bit the part of a corporate mogul. His sharp suit, the gold cufflinks that caught the light, and the confident smile he flashed when I walked in, all made it clear that this was a man who knew what he was doing. "Taylor," he greeted me with a handshake. "It's good to see you again." I smiled, trying to mask my nerves. "Thanks for having me. I wasn't sure what to expect." He gestured for me to sit across from him. "Well, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. You're a woman with potential, Taylor. You have something special, something I think could be very valuable." I blinked. "Valuable?" I repeated, unsure of what he meant. "Yes," he said, his eyes steady. "The way you handled yourself at the wedding, your ability to rise to the occasion, even without knowing what was happening, that was impressive. I think you could be a great asset to our upcoming events." My heart skipped a beat. "You mean, what? You want me to help with future events?" Matthew leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "Not just help. I want you to become an integral part of the operation. You've got the kind of presence that people respond to. And I think with the right guidance, you could lead the charge on some very lucrative projects." My mind was spinning. This was insane. A few weeks ago, I had been invisible, blending into the background. Now, I was being asked to step into a position of power, a position where I could actually make a difference. But the weight of it all was terrifying. Could I handle it? Did I even want it? "I'm not sure I understand," I said carefully. "What exactly are you offering me?" Matthew smiled, his expression softening. "I'm offering you a partnership. I want you to co-sponsor future events with me. We can start small, but I have big plans. And with your ability to connect with people, I think we could build something incredible together." For a moment, all I could do was sit there, processing what he was saying. This was a massive opportunity, one that could change everything. But was I ready for it? Could I really step into this new role? Matthew seemed to sense my hesitation. "I know this is a lot to take in, but think about it. You've spent so much time in the shadows, Taylor. Now it's your turn to step into the light." I didn't know what to say. All my life, I had been told I was too quiet, too invisible, and now I was being told I had something people wanted, something that could make me a key player in this world of glitz and glamour. "You don't have to decide today," Matthew continued, "but I want you to think about it. The offer's on the table." As I walked out of his office, my mind was racing. The world had shifted beneath my feet. Everything had changed, and I had to make a decision. But the moment I stepped outside the building, something inside me clicked. I didn't need to rush into this. I didn't need to take Matthew's offer just because it was shiny and new. I had to be sure it was what I really wanted, and not just a reaction to the things my mother and sister had said. I wasn't going to let this be another thing I did to prove them wrong. This was my decision, mine alone. As the days went by, I took a step back. I evaluated my life, my goals, and what I truly wanted. And slowly, I began to realize that this wasn't just about business opportunities. It was about my own identity. For so long, I had been living in the shadows of my family, trying to meet their expectations, trying to fit into their mold. But now, I was done with that. It was time for me to live on my own terms. But then, as I was starting to feel more certain about my path, something unexpected happened. I received a phone call from my mother. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "It's about Jane." I stood there holding my phone, trying to process what my mother had just said. About Jane? My heart thudded in my chest, and I felt a strange mix of unease and curiosity. "What's going on, Mom?" I asked, my voice suddenly feeling too small for the gravity of her words. "I need you to come over. It's important," she replied quickly, her tone tense. I hesitated, a knot forming in my stomach. Something was off. It wasn't like Mom to call me unless it was absolutely necessary, and the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. "I'll be there in a few," I said, trying to steady myself. I didn't even give her a chance to respond before I ended the call and grabbed my coat. The thought of Jane weighed heavily on my mind. What could have happened? Why was Mom calling me about her? I barely remembered the drive to Mom's house, The road seemed longer than usual, my thoughts bouncing from one scenario to another. Was Jane in trouble? Had something gone wrong? The possibilities swirled like storm clouds, each darker than the last. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I was already bracing for something serious. Mom was waiting for me at the door when I arrived. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she ushered me inside. She didn't even offer me a seat, instead guiding me to the living room where Jane sat, looking as pale as our mother, her eyes red, her expression blank. "Jane, what's going on?" I asked, my voice tinged with worry. But Jane didn't respond immediately. She just stared at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. Mom glanced at me and then at Jane, before taking a deep breath. "It's bad, Taylor," she said quietly. She's been dealing with some things, and we need to talk about it." I felt my stomach drop. What could be so serious that they were keeping it from me until now? Jane's voice broke through the silence, soft and broken. "I didn't want to tell you. I thought I could handle it, but I can't." She paused, tears brimming in her eyes. "I've been struggling with my finances. I've been hiding it for months. Everything's been spiraling, and I didn't know who to turn to." My mind raced as I processed her words. Jane, my perfect sister, was in trouble, financial trouble. I couldn't wrap my head around it. She had always been the one with everything together, the one with the successful career, the perfect life. But now she was sitting in front of me, broken and vulnerable. "What happened?" I asked, my voice softer now. "I started taking out loans. I thought I could fix it, that it would get better. But it didn't. The bills piled up, and I had to borrow more just to cover what I owed. I've maxed out credit cards. I don't know how to get out of it." The weight of her words hit me hard. Jane, the woman who had always been so proud, so unapproachable, was drowning. And she hadn't let anyone in. Not me, not Mom, not anyone. "Have you told Matthew?" I asked cautiously, knowing how close they had been, how he had been helping her with the wedding. Jane shook her head quickly. I can't let him know. He's been helping me too much already. I don't want him to think I'm weak, that I can't handle things." Mom sat down beside Jane, her voice trembling. "We've been trying to help her, Taylor, but she's kept so much from us. We just found out the full extent of it today. She's behind on her mortgage. She's about to lose the house." My stomach twisted. The house, the place that had always been the symbol of Jane's success. It was everything to her. I stood there for a moment, my mind racing. Everything I thought I knew about my sister was now in question. This was not the person I had grown up with. But then something inside me clicked. Jane needed help, but she didn't need me to criticize her or tell her how badly she'd messed up. She needed me to be there for her, to help her find a way out. "I'll help," I said firmly, my voice stronger than I felt. "We'll figure this out together." Both Mom and Jane looked at me, surprised by my response. Jane wiped her eyes, her expression softening. "You'd help me?" "Of course," I replied, sitting down next to her. "You're my sister. I'm not going to leave you to deal with this alone." I don't deserve your help," Jane whispered, her voice cracking. "After everything I've done, I don't deserve it." I shook my head. "You deserve a chance to fix this, Jane. We all make mistakes, but we can't keep running from them. We have to face them head on." There was a long silence as Jane processed my words. And then she nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of relief and guilt. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. I put my arm around her shoulders, trying to offer comfort. This wasn't how I had imagined this moment, but in some strange way it felt right. We sat in the quiet of the living room for a while, letting the weight of the situation sink in. There was so much to figure out, so much to repair. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was where I needed to be, beside my sister, ready to face whatever came next. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were going to be tough conversations, hard decisions, and uncomfortable truths, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because this wasn't just about Jane. This was about me too, about reclaiming my life, my strength, and my place in the world. But the next day, as we started looking at ways to get Jane's finances back on track, I got an unexpected call from Matthew. "Taylor," he said, his voice clipped. We need to talk. There's something I need to tell you. It's about the sponsorship. I froze, the phone still pressed to my ear. Something was off. I'll be there, I said quickly, my pulse quickening. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my world was about to turn upside down once again. The moment I hung up the phone with Matthew, I felt a rush of anxiety flood through me. What was this about? My mind churned with possibilities. The sponsorship had felt like the perfect next step, something I had earned after everything that had happened at the wedding. And now Matthew wanted to talk? What had changed? I was already in the car, heading back to the same sleek office building where I had first met him, the city skyline towering over me like an unapproachable wall. But this time, I wasn't nervous in the way I had been before. No, this time there was an edge to my steps, an awareness that something was off, something wasn't adding up. When I reached the building, I was ushered into Matthew's office without hesitation. The air felt thick with something I couldn't quite place, tension maybe. He wasn't sitting at his desk like last time. Instead, he stood by the windows, looking out over the city below. "Taylor," he said, his voice distant. He didn't turn to face me immediately. "I'm glad you came." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment before I spoke. "Matthew, what's going on? You said you needed to talk." He turned, his face serious, almost like he was debating how much to say. "I've been thinking a lot about our previous conversations, and after reviewing some things on my end, I realized I've made a mistake. I need to be upfront with you about something important." A pit formed in my stomach. A mistake? What was he talking about? "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady but with an undercurrent of suspicion. I wasn't about to let him twist this conversation, not after everything. He sighed, his shoulders slumping as he finally met my eyes. "I need to apologize for offering you the sponsorship position so quickly. There are other factors at play here that I didn't disclose before." He paused, and I could see the conflict in his eyes, the uncertainty that wasn't there before. "The truth is, there are people who are very interested in sponsoring these events. People who have much more influence than you or I." I blinked, not sure where this was going. "Are you saying you were never serious about offering me the role?" "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "It's not that. But what I didn't tell you is that the partnership comes with strings attached. I wasn't upfront about the expectations, Taylor. There's pressure from these investors and—" He stopped himself, clearly trying to choose his words carefully. "They want control, full control." I felt the air get heavier around me. My hands tightened into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm, to listen. "What do you mean, full control?" Matthew took a step forward, his eyes searching mine. "They want to run the show. They want someone who can be a face for the company, someone who won't question their decisions, who will stay in the background and make them money. I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't allow it. Your vision, your independence, it doesn't fit with what they're looking for. They want a puppet, Taylor, not someone who thinks for herself." I felt my stomach churn. Every word he spoke felt like a betrayal, like I had been a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing. "So, you're saying the offer was never real? That you were just using me?" Matthew's face twisted with regret. "No, it was real. But I didn't know about the full extent of the corporate interests involved. I wanted to give you a chance. But now, I see that it would have come at too high a price." I stood there for a moment, my mind racing, trying to process everything he had just said. All this time, I thought I had been climbing up, moving toward something bigger, something that was finally mine. But now, I was realizing that the foundation I thought I had been building on was nothing but sand. "I'm not interested in being anyone's puppet," I said finally, my voice quieter than before but firm. "You can keep the sponsorship, Matthew. I'm done with this." His face hardened, but there was something almost relieved in his eyes. "I understand," he said softly. "I'm sorry for misleading you. I didn't want it to go down this way. But you're right to walk away. You deserve better." I turned on my heel, walking toward the door, but as I reached for the handle, I hesitated. My mind was still buzzing, and something about this conversation still felt incomplete. I had to know one more thing. Matthew, I said, not turning to face him. Why did you offer me the sponsorship in the first place? What was your angle? He was quiet for a moment, and then I heard him sigh. I thought you were different, Taylor. I thought you had the potential to bring something new to the table, but I was wrong. I see now that you don't fit into their world. And honestly, you deserve better than the mess I was about to drag you into. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. It was the truth, and in some twisted way, it was a relief. I didn't have to chase after some elusive dream that wasn't mine. Not anymore. As I walked out of the building, I felt a strange sense of finality settle over me. I had been given the chance to walk away before things got too messy, before I lost myself in someone else's vision. And now, I was free. I was no longer tied to the expectations of anyone else. Not my mother, not my sister, and certainly not Matthew. Back home, I sat down with Jane, and we began talking through her situation, together, for the first time in years, as equals. She needed my help, and I was ready to give it. It wasn't going to be easy, but we would figure it out, one step at a time. And as for me, I was finally taking control of my own life on my own terms. As I closed my eyes that night, a quiet confidence filled me. I had learned a powerful lesson. Sometimes you have to walk away from the things that aren't meant for you to make room for what truly belongs to you. And in the end, that's exactly what I was doing.